Welcome to the A New Narrative podcast, where we discuss all things health and human design. I'm Sam Zagar, your projector guide and host. This is a show about deconditioning. My goal is to confront our conditioned, not self narratives so that we can write them anew through the lens of our true selves. It's through this process that I hope to guide you to your signature life. Okay, welcome back. This is one of the newer episodes on what we're calling A New Narrative 3.0, and something has changed, hopefully quite permanently. I had the pleasure of working with a woman named Caitlin, and when she was done being my client, I didn't want her to stop talking to me, so I asked her to come be an occasional co-host of A New Narrative. So Caitlin is a 3-5 pure manifesting generator, and we have a lot to talk about. Hi, Caitlin. Hi. Okay, so let's start with how you found me, because our relationship started with you inviting me. So what made you want to have a conversation with me the first time?
Well, I had my first human design reading last February-ish, over a year ago. And, once that door was opened, it's, it's very, it felt the most resonant. Like it gave me permission to fully claim some things that I had, still been reconciling within and keeping kind of a secret, actually. And so it was just this amazing thing. And then I had my husband do it, and I did my daughters as well with her. And it was just super like clear that there was a lot of medicine in this work. And so I was playing around with my experiment for months and months, and I would, taking in stuff all over, especially from Raw. But, Raw's heady and feels sometimes like it's more like something's shifting inside, but I'm not necessarily understanding things. Like it's really hard to translate that sometimes into something that I can share with other people. And I was actually in Fiji with my partner, and he was there doing a healing retreat, and me and my daughter were just enjoying the beaches. And whenever we come in the afternoons when it was really hot for quiet time, I stumbled across your YouTube channel,
Okay.
and instantly I lit up. Like I lit up, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the response she's talking about. Like it was just so powerful, and I hadn't had that yet. And so I sat with it and waited, like just to see if I kept having that same response over a period of time. And then finally, I was like, I talked to my partner. I was like, I put aside some money for my own work and healing, and I was like, this is what I want to do with it. So, yeah.
Okay, now give me a little bit of backstory. You've brought up your daughter and you've brought up your partner. So do they know their human designs? What are they?
Yes. My husband is a 5-1 projector,
Mhm.
and he is split definition.
Okay.
And then my daughter is a 1-4 reflector. Um, and she has her son in gate 45, which is always really interesting.
Oh, it's so funny, right? Because they have no definition, right? It's like reflector, no channel, no single def, no. I mean, they don't even include their authority in their name because it's just implied. Reflector is, well, we know these ones are waiting a lunar cycle. Now, your daughter has one other thing about her that I really, really love that makes her very, very special, and that's her variable configuration. So I had I don't know what's the right word here. It's like the blessing of, that's the word that wants to come through. I had like a blessing of meeting Rosie. And one of my favorite things about Rosie is the 1-4 profile because it makes her innocence motivation, which I really connect to. And I really like meeting young children with innocence motivation because I think that they're a very good example of what it is to be innocence motivation. But Rosie being a reflector and innocence and quad right, like she really does come across as like the definition of childlike wonder to me. Like she's, I don't want to say things like, she's in her own world or anything like that, because I don't like the idea that Rosie's world is separate from everybody else's world. I want my world to be like her world. But she's got the power to create this feeling as if she's in her own world and be protected in it. And well, I love having a 5-year-old as a role model.
Yeah, she's also inner vision as well. So
And your partner is, you
all
said
left.
the one all left. Okay, quad
All left.
left, the binary to the daughter. And he's an emoting projector. So okay, you said split definition. He's got emoting. What's his other channel then?
Ben has,
Is it mental
yeah, he has the one right in the center.
awareness?
He has the channel of struggle.
Hmm.
Um, he has one more too. I can't remember right now.
But either way, all of his channels are pure individual, and so are yours. And then we know Rosie
Yes.
doesn't have channels, which means within this family, the dominating circuitry is individual. So, one of the things that I like about this is that you've had a very independent relationship with your partner. You're both very independent people. You don't necessarily live together all the time. You have different projects. You rotate with Rosie. Sometimes everybody's all together. How long have you been together, and how has the hyper independence almost played out in your relationship?
Ben and I have been together for 19 years.
Mhm.
And um, I think the way that it's remained so healthy is because we've been very unconsciously aware of the need for, we have very different ways of relating to the world. I'm very much like, my pastimes need to be, you know, floating at the lake or going for a walk in the woods, and he needs to do high adrenaline sports like big wave surfing or BMX biking, big jumps, right? So we just, through our relationship, have always kind of done trips, vacations separate. And then once we had Rosie, I mean, even before that, he would be away for work for weeks on end. And same with me. I would be away teaching retreats and things like that, and trainings away for work for weeks on end. And it was just, it kept the passion and the health alive, that we were both living our own lives. Anytime we intertwined too much, there would be more frustration for me, obviously, and probably bitterness for him. And so, yeah, it just was a really challenging thing once we had Rosie, because there's this like conditioning where, oh, you've had a baby and you have to remain all together. And it is really tricky at first, obviously, with a newborn, and you know how that is. You do kind of need the containment and the support, but we found our way through it where now, usually Rosie sleeps with me, and we still do this sort of like mixed life. And the best part is because we have this motor home that we tend to live on and off in, but it's always there. So one of us tends to spend a lot of time in that, like separately when we go on trips and things like that. So it's given us a lot of permission to figure out and continue to realize ourselves as we grow and change and evolve. And I think it's genuinely the only reason why we can be such strong partners. Actually, the more we get too entangled, the more obviously like the patterns of our conditioning and our parents play out, the codependent patterns. um, so we're very aware of that.
So there is the awareness of deconditioning is easier when you're not always in each other's space.
Yes, it's a combo of the two, right? It's like, imagine we have to first be connected to ourselves individually so that we can meet and then tend to the relationship. When I am disconnected from myself, if Ben's been away and I've been solo momming, I need some time. When he first gets home, it's like, take the child, peace out, because I have nothing to give him. I'm not connected to myself. And if I try to stay, it gets like icky, right? Frictiony. So I usually take that time, and then I come back, and then we will prioritize some time together. And it's not going to lie, especially when there's been some space, there's always some stuff to work through because the change has happened. Like, we both grown in that time we've been apart, and things need to recalibrate. Um, but I find it's really rewarding, and I'm really blessed because he's such a devoted partner. I know a lot of men these days are afraid to face their shadow. And one thing that Ben keeps proving to me is that, like, he's not willing to keep putting his shadow on me as like something that I'm meant to manage. Like, I think that's such a conditioning in my matriarchal lineage, and I think for all women, the wound of like taking on the men's pain and almost like keeping it a secret or protecting them from it and thinking that they can't handle their own problems and their own issues. And I think that's the healing we've been really working through. We've had some massive breakthroughs in that department, and it feels like more and more life force is coming back to me because I'm not wasting all this energy bound in his unprocessed and wounded child and patterns and things like that. So I think that time is really helpful because I notice, that it's so much clearer, the juxtaposition of me being in my own power, in my own space, and how much more energy I have. And then when he comes around, the expectation before was, please hold all this weight. And I would get tired and feel heavy and start to feel frustrated. And so I saw that pattern, and we've been cleaning that all up. And, it helps that, again, he wants to participate in that.
Now, if you've been together for 19 years, through the process of our work together, if I have a generator or a sacral or manifesting generator client, the point is to know yourself. No matter what we market as like the core of our work together, if you don't know yourself better by the end of it, I haven't done a very good role of guiding. And through our conversations, I got to know you as you got to know you. There were certain things that were revealed in some of our conversations. And one of the things that stood out to me was the undefined ego. You have a very activated but undefined ego. You've got a hanging 21, a hanging 51, a hanging 26, and you also have a hanging 37 pointing to your ego. So it is very, very easy to turn your ego on. I would say of all of the centers with hanging gates, this is the one that looks like it should be the most challenging for you to work through. And when you told me that you used to be a professional fighter, I could definitely see ways in which you had used the ego to get you through certain things, to defend yourself in a lot of ways, to stick up for yourself, to fight for yourself, quite literally, to fight for the approval of others. Now, I also know that Rosie is only 5 years old. I'm curious what happened for you in the last 19 years. How did you change in your relationship to wanting to prove certain things, wanting to prove your worth, wanting to prove how strong you are? How is that dissipated, and how did it affect your relationship? Because it sounds like I I really hesitate using the words masculine and feminine within human design because there's a difference between our experience with the words, our association with the words, and their actual relevancy mechanically within human design. But in many ways, we know that the ego comes across in a very strong, borderline aggressive, assertive kind of way, which most people feel or interpret as a masculine kind of energy. So did you did you associate it with that? Do you identify with that? How has it changed?
Well,
What do
one
you
thing I want to clarify, I wouldn't call myself I was a professional fighter. I was on the provincial and national team. Um,
That's pretty professional.
well, it's
And
an
you can
amateur thing,
survive.
right? Like it never, I didn't get paid for it. That's what professional
Okay.
means. So I don't want to, yeah. Um, and it was definitely a powerful, I did it since I was 9. So it was a powerful, I was black belt and, did the whole traditional side as well as the more sport competitive side. And it definitely influenced, obviously I was around men all the time. I have a brother, and my dad was he projected a lot of like, men are bad, all they want is sex, be afraid of them, learn to stand up for yourself. And so I definitely gained a lot of power in some ways and confidence in walking through the world, but it was heavy on the masculine, we'll put it that way. I stopped bleeding, I had a lot of menstrual issues. One of the things that's interesting, when I was in the ring, I was really in my feminine. I waited. I was very much the patient fighter, and I only counterattacked. So I waited for them to make the first move. And I was very receptive, and I always call it my magician. It's like I could see before they would attack. Like I could see it above myself, and that's how I know. I mean it's broken down now, obviously in hindsight, but it was very much like this. It felt like a receptive feminine quality that could psychically know what was going to happen. And yet outside the ring, I struggled so much with being enough, wanting to be enough for my dad, wanting to be enough for my coaches, proving myself. I was a straight A student, you know, winning all the awards. And it was this exhausting thing where none of it was necessarily true for me, right? It wasn't like that was coming. So I felt like a lot of my life, and then of course you go to university and school and you're trained to be an expert, right? And that is just the most egotistical thing. Like we're always a student and we can also be a teacher, but we're also always the student. And I felt throughout my career at times, I like to call it my significant, that part of me that wants to be like significant and wants to be enough and wants to be loved outside myself. And whenever I'm in that, obviously, the projections, being a 3-5, a five, I have a lot of stuff that, you know, reverberates that isn't fun with that. And so I think in that time, you know, it's been what rides me is more the relating, like how people see me, and especially men, like authoritative men in my life were always where I would be the most uh out of alignment, like acting from my ego, trying to prove myself with my dad with all the things I did. And I think over time, as I took more and more space, I did more and more healing. I wandered. I followed that like 1-8 call, which is just, you know, constantly trying to get me to have these creative, expressive relating to the world. I don't know, it felt like it was really uh, a part of what drove me to like seek out different experiences. Through that, I really started to connect more and more with what I would call the feminine within me and started to heal the relationship to my bleed and my cycle. And, you know, I was down at Burning Man and the doctors had said, like, unless you do surgery and do all this hormone therapy, there's no hope in hell you're getting pregnant, from what, you know, it looked like with the endometriosis and the cysts and all the issues that I had. And the fact that I wouldn't ovulate and all that. But, you know, through holistic work, through somatic healing, through connecting with my own rhythms, reconnecting with Mother Earth was a huge part of that as well. Uh, you know, and then just following my joy. Let's be straight, following my joy and being more lit up. Like, yes, following the yeses and stop saying so much yes to the no's to prove myself. You know, that got more and more clear. And then we went to Burning Man and I got pregnant with Rosie, and she is the one that has opened the doorway for me. I cannot believe how much she has mirrored back the bullshit in my significant. So now it's like I had to quit. I had to draw. I had to like dissolve my identity. I died so wholeheartedly. I moved to a remote island for 2 years, and I grieved this crazy persona that had been built off that ego as well. And I let all of it go. I did ceremony and rituals to continue to like just come back to this kind of core. And now it feels like I'm free most of the time. I just live in the moment and I just have this more attuned dynamic with my sacral. It's getting more and more clear the more time I'm taking to just take a few moments with myself, the more it's easier to just trust life. And it's like, you know, synchronicities and opportunities. I have less of an idea of what my life will look like. Like goals now are just kind of bullshit to me. It's sort of
Yeah.
like, well, life, what are we co-creating? Like I'm ready. I'm ready to see what that is. And so I get less fixated on tasks. I'm playing out less of the, you know, the root pressure of just constantly needing to do. And I mean, I think this is such a journey and I wish it for everyone that they get their human design reading and they really take it serious, this opportunity to lean into strategy and authority in a way that like really relieves a lot of the pressure, relieves a lot of the need to play out these like these not self themes and these not self um, personas, characters that we create and believe that we are, which is the scary part, right? And we make everyone else believe that we are.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, we talked about what Ben's channels were, but I never said to the audience yet what all of your channels are. So you acknowledge that you are the 1 to 8, the channel of inspiration, which curiously is on right now. We have 8.3 in our transits. Today's a third line day. The 8 being on connects my 1 to the 8. So I'm a transit defined inspiration today, and you're the real one. And then we also have perfected form, so going from the spleen to the G center. And then we also have the channel of the beat going from the sacral to the G center. So you're a pure individual, Ben's a pure individual. And in the beginning, when you were talking about listening to Raw, you did such a good job of describing what a pure individual can do, which is when you're listening to him, it's like he makes your body feel different. Oh my God, a bird just flew into the window. I'm so sorry. I hope you're okay. Um, third line, it flew
I was
away.
like, here, hey,
Oh my goodness.
his spirit.
Okay, hold on. Let me retract myself. Fuck, man. Sometimes you lose your focus with the craziest things.
Can't make it up.
Okay, so you were listening to Raw, and you were aware of the fact something was happening. A lot of people have an adverse reaction to Raw in the beginning. I don't know quite how to describe that because it didn't happen to me. I have a different experience in that I'm only interested in Raw's voice. I tend to get like, ugh, when it's somebody else, and I don't have a mental reason for why that happens. It's just how I respond to the material. But he is not a lot of people's starting point. A lot of the times there needs to be a more gentle introduction to the material. And then when people are really ready for their experiment, they tend to more gravitate towards Raw at that point. But you saying that, you could feel this, you could feel something in your body. That's one of the things that I really want to focus on for our conversation is the effect that you have on people as a pure individual. Now, you're one of my only clients, especially my only package clients, where I actually got to meet you before we started in person because you're on Vancouver Island. That's where my family lives. I went there. We got to meet. We did our 3 months. And then I came back to Vancouver Island. Now, I have an open invitation, let's say, from my family. So it's a very easy place for me to go to. They have a big RV that me and my son stay in. I can bring a dog. Like it's very, very easy. It feels good as the projector. But my purpose of going to the island this time wasn't something I could mentally land on or comprehend. I just knew this is where I'm going. I had a lot of reasons come up about even maybe why I shouldn't from a mental place, most of them fear based. And I was like, nope, there's something there. Either something's supposed to happen to me or I'm supposed to meet something or whatever it is. But I was clearly unprepared for what happened. Um, and it's one of those things where, like, I almost want to think if I had known what was going to happen, I may have tried to even block myself more from coming, which would have been very low grade self getting in my way. I don't think she was allowed to get in my way, which is why things played out the way that they did. But I will say, there's a bit of a projector high horse in our ability to recognize the other. We can do pretty cool things as a projector. But you fucking trumped me seriously that one day when we were sitting on my mom's lawn and you were like, can I do something to you? I think that's how you started it. Will you do so? Or you might have said, will you do something for me? Or will you do something with me?
You
Because
went down.
yeah, the way that you asked it felt like you engaged my ego in what was going on. It wasn't a response question. It was an invitation to my definition. And I was just like, lay down. Let's see where this is going to go, right? Extreme curiosity. And based on how you placed your hands on me and identified where my voice was getting stuck. I've mentally gone over this a few times. I'm sure that she like my voice was probably up here in some kind of breathy on not in my body kind of way. I was probably avoiding eye contact at some level. I was probably being quite surfacey. And I think that you were like, no. So what were you sensing that made you want to do what you did?
I'm going to come to this in 1 second. I just want to offer for all of you that might have resistance towards raw. It's the shadow that you're afraid of looking at yourself. And it's so important that you reconcile that the shadow is wholly a part of who you are. Until you want to be full friends with your shadow, you're going to feel resistance towards raw. That's all there is to it. He's holding all of it. So just food for thought. And I hope that if you're listening, you'll return to it and just let your body receive it. You don't have to understand it. Like I would just listen to it before bed, lying there like a meditation, and let it into my body. Um, and then Sam, you're the one I go to if I want to actually have more of a way to translate that. And you hold the shadow as well because you appreciate Ra's work. That's the other thing. It's not just a, like, you could let termed it pop HD, but that's really important to clarify. So I just wanted to add to that because that was really there for me. And so coming back to your question about um, that moment, I have this like, especially when I care deeply about someone, which really ends up being all people as soon as I get to know them. But because we had built a relationship, I felt safe with you. And, you know, one of the things that I connect to when I'm in the presence of someone that I'm both respecting and love and appreciate is, the sensitivity to like, oh, something's really off here. Something's really off. And I know how to help. I know how to support that. I know how to move that. I know how to mutate that. I know how to make something different out of that. But the way that I go about it, as you know, is just really weird and intense, and that's not something you do on like a first date. You know what I
I
mean? Like,
loved it. I
yeah,
loved it, but I might be a rare breed.
yeah. But that's because we had built at least some semblance of trust in our dynamic in the 3 months and already have meeting. Definitely I was bold. I won't say that I wasn't bold, but I felt again this like anchoredness in our dynamic. So when I saw what was going on, I just felt called. It's almost like, how you sometimes verbal diarrhea something. It's really, you got to get it out. It's the same thing. I get this like deep impulse that feels like it comes from my belly. And it's like, all I want to do is uh, siphon it out. And feels like a vacuum kind of, um, because it's blocking the ability for me to be really in connection with you. And when there's an eclipse happening, an eclipse of inner child wound, a past pattern, doesn't really matter what you want to call it, shadow, uh, then it blocks the dynamic. And yeah, I feel like it's what I love about friendship and relationship is having someone see you, all of you, and love all of you, and not take people's shadow bits. Like, we're all gonna f up, and we're all gonna be the significant if you're an open ego, or whatever the thing is, you're gonna play out these things at times. And it's really nice to have someone who loves you enough to hold that, to not use it against you, not burn you at the stake with it, and to be willing to like be like, hey, let's touch this together. Like, I'm here with you, because I know what it is like to touch my own shadow over and over again, because I do that as a daily practice, to be in relationship with all parts of me. And so it's really a way that I can be of service, really. And it feels like really empowering, I think, empowering to the moment.
I want to acknowledge all the places where the five lives in your body graph for a second for to preface what I'm about to say next. So you're a 3-5, so your body is a fifth line. You are high sound determination, so we have a fifth color determination. You are a pure individual, which makes you very acoustic in nature. The frequency is incredibly important. And, you know, the projector does so much of their job by grabbing the magnetic monopole in the other. But I felt like what you grabbed in me was my sound. You heard
Mhm.
my sound and you went, this is off. This is not what she's supposed to sound like. So you went to work to try and move things around in me to get a different sound out of me. Like there was so much um, placing your hands where you felt like my sound could not go below. So, you know, maybe you started in like my jaw and then my throat and then down to my chest. You know, at some point you're down on my left calf and we're talking about this through line. What's the line?
The deep core line.
Yeah, you were like, you are flexible on your outsides, but rigid as fuck down this center line. You're holding things so tightly. And what you required of me in that process was to breathe differently, to open my mouth, my throat, like to relax parts of me in ways that I actually had no conscious awareness of how to do this or that this was an option or could be done. Because I'm the kind of person who, like, if I know it can be done, I'll go for it. Like, I'm doing face massage every day, but I still don't have the ability to acknowledge why my jaw is so tight and how to actually solve that problem. And I think that I would not have been as open to receiving that from you without an experience I had with you a couple of weeks beforehand, maybe 2 weeks before that, where it was your last session in your package. And I had a shocking moment 5 minutes before our phone call. And when I got into the room with you, I just started crying. And you rescheduled your last session with me in order to just hang out with me and let me talk about what was going on for me. I was very emotional during that process, not only because of what I was experiencing that I brought to you. I was like, the ocean breaths are coming.
Yeah. Do it fully though, not half-ass.
She's a great coach, guys.
Oh. Open to the vulnerability that's here. Who wants to be seen?
It was so hard for me to receive in that moment for so many different reasons. You know, I want to say being ego, being purely tribal, being a single mom, like being the hyper independent provider that I am. There are so many ways in which I have to depend on myself. And I see my needs as being an inconvenience to somebody else. And so when you offered that to me, it was it was a big experience for me just to be able to accept that from you, which was definitely the foundation that I needed in order to be open to the next stage of what happened on my mom's lawn. And even that I didn't recognize was preparation for what was going to happen a couple days later at your house. And that was recalibrating in a level I have not experienced through work with somebody else. Everything I've ever done has been alone, especially in terms of like my own personal work, my own self-development. I've never hired coaches. I've truly never worked with other people. It was very powerful. And the when I expected the power to run out, it didn't. That was one of the really interesting things. It wasn't like, you know, the hour that we spent at your place, that wasn't just the work. It was everything afterwards. It was the whole next day. It was knowing how to go back into aura with other people and how to not protect myself, but maintain and hold what we had just done without letting it go or and then you know I felt like I was sick, quote unquote, for you know like the next almost 2 weeks afterwards. Like I finally feel like I'm not presenting as sick, but the sick, all it was needing to consistently clear my throat. I have just been moving congestion, mucus, stagnation. There was physical pain associated with what you did, and I loved it. And I think that's really important to talk about. There were ways, in particular, one thing you did to my jaw. You pushed so hard into my jaw that I was unable to close my mouth. And it felt, well, very, very, very fucking painful, truthfully, but I wanted it and I knew it was necessary and I knew that whatever was on the other side of it was worth it. And I think that you undid a couple years of vocal you deconditioned a few years of vocal conditioning that I had.
You did that. You undid it. So we really, this is really important. Let's all take a moment here to clarify that the body is our soul in manifestation, or the crystal having an experience of its form. And the thing is that any experience in the body is you. So I wasn't actually causing you pain. I was actually just bringing attention to the pain that you held in there for so long, and it just wanted out. It wanted to be expressed. Pain is something that wants to be felt and transmuted. And the thing is we don't allow that in our culture. Something happens that's painful, we repress it. And what does that do? It creates pain in the body. And then we say, oh, the person did that to me, you know, or whatever. We blame and we become a victim. There's a perpetrator and we're the victim, and it's so disempowering, and our power actually diminishes. And we wonder why we attract more of that, more of those situations. So one thing's really important is to see that everything that happened within your body, and anyone's body for that matter, and this goes across the board, whether it's disease or pain or whatever's going on, it's you. First, you have to be willing to change your beliefs that it's separate. It's not, it's you. It's you, and you are now going to have a relationship to it. And the only way to translate or to transmute or to alchemize the situation is to feel it, to go through it. You can't escape pain. You have to experience it so fully in the body, and it can't be something that you stay above either. We know we were so manipulative. We're so good at I was a hardcore athlete, and I trained hard to stay in front of my pain, right? It's like I use the pain of working out so hard to not feel the pain inside of me. It was so crazy. It was so intense. And as soon as I stopped, I went on this 10-day silent meditation retreat. And I remember we weren't allowed to do anything. And I couldn't work out for 10 days. I had never not taken it. I never had a day off in my entire life at that point that I could remember. And so all that came out was all of this pain. I broke down sobbing in the middle of a meditation because I had all this pain in the body that just wanted to be experienced. And it was, some serious trauma that came out, fighting, like lots of trauma from fighting as well. But it doesn't really matter what it is in the end. It could be ancestral as well. Like I moved some of my mom's pain and my grandmother's pain. I've moved out rapes that didn't happen to me, that have happened to the women before me. I mean, I also had to work through my own as well. But I created it because it was already in my nervous system. It was already in my body. It was imprinted. I got it imprinted in my mom's womb that this is the program. And I played it out. And until I could become sovereign, so to speak, the only way to do that is the only way to become sovereign is to experience everything through the body wholeheartedly to the end. And the thing is, my voice has changed dramatically as well. I used to have up here, way higher and like squeaky, and I couldn't speak from down here because I was so afraid to touch what I needed to touch. And I really want to add as well, one of the things that women do when you talk about being a single mom and you talk about like having to hold the container as well as find times to like nourish and nurture and be in that feminine relating. I mean, it's something that I think is You can do it. You can do it because you're incredible and you're amazing and it's wonderful, but I don't believe it's the truth. I don't believe it's the truth. I think this conditioning is a projection of, a really unhealthy relationship of the masculine hoarding power over the feminine, and the feminine thinking, believing that she's not enough, believing that she's lesser value because that she relates differently. And I say she, that's not the identities here. I'm saying the energies. One thing that I observe in my relationship so wholeheartedly is part of the healing is I'm not carrying his pain anymore. And this is why women, they're single. I'd rather be a single mom and do this on my own and have to hold the container, because guess what? I'm so fucking tired of carrying, pardon my language, carrying your pain for you. That is more exhausting. That is more excruciating. And it separates me from myself, from my power. I'd rather play both energies and do this dance than to keep playing out that codependent and toxic dynamic. And this is a conditioning that we've all been modeled. And so I think women who are celibate are probably the most empowered and brave women, because they are literally saying to men, get your shit together until you can be a provider, a container in truth, and hold your own pain and deal with your own shadow. I will not let you in to the gate of this beautiful psychic, creator, this vessel that brings through life, brought through you. So until we're acknowledged on an equal playing field, not as equals because we're very different in the way we want to express, but as like we both need each other and equally, there's got to be things we won't tolerate anymore. There's got to be
It's like
things we won't tolerate anymore.
swapping out independence for responsibility is kind of what it feels like.
Ben and I were having very intimate sex last night, and he's, the channel of emoting. So when he gets into these spaces, sometimes it's his intimacy level is much deeper than I quite often am comfortable with. And at one point, he's massaging my cervix with his lingam. The cervix is the heart chakra of the woman, and the tip of the lingam is the heart chakra for the man. And the two in connection through tantra work, you learn that there's healing that can happen. And I have some trauma there, from rape and also from him. And one of the things that happened in this session, he broke down and he was in my body, and he said, I'm taking this pain. This is my pain. You're not supposed to carry it. I'm taking responsibility for it. And I could feel it all just leaving my body. Dumped his pain in my body years ago, his shame, his wounds, because the ego in men, they're raised to not feel, to, like be better than everyone else, to not look at their mistakes, to, there's this like padding that, and the women are the worst for perpetuating it. Like, I'm in this pole dancing class and there's this one man in it, and he's like a big, good looking, solid 30-year-old man. And all the women are always doting and applauding him for the stupidest move. And we're all learning it together. And I'm like, what is wrong? Let's hold each other up. Like, why are you so fixated on this man? Like, he's just spinning around a pole like the rest of us. Like, nobody's, it's this interesting thing we all need to peel back and heal. And so I think, well, and I get a sense from experiencing some of your beautiful opening that your matriarchal lineage has a lot of hate on towards men, and fair enough. And because of that, uh, if you keep holding that, you won't find another man. You won't be in partnership, because every time they start to get close, you'll find reasons to, um, to push them away, to belittle them is what we do, to criticize and to make them feel small and not capable, and they won't want to be around you. And the thing is having a man in my life, I appreciate so much, because when he is in his power and he's providing, which he's an amazing provider and container, I get to be in the fullest expression of myself. And that is something that I'm still uncovering. And it's with my daughter, I get to be home with her. I get to uncover all this creative force that wants to come out that I've never had the safety to do. He provides not just container, but a safe container when he's in his power. And it's my job to hold him accountable when he's not, and to do it in a way that's coming from love, not from, you know, we as women can really hurt other people with the fact that we see other people's shadow and we use it against them. That's not love. Women are here to be the gaze of unconditional love. I mean, the feminine, for our children, for the earth, and for our men. So they can remember. Like, if men were connected to the love that we bring, that unconditional gaze, they would not be treating the earth. And I don't mean men are the only people treating the earth like women are doing it too. We're playing it out through our masculine. But when we reconnect with that energy of unconditional love, the gaze of unconditional love, being seen, fully seen. I mean, how many of us have inner child patterns that feel unseen, and feel like it's not safe to be seen? And where was the container? Where was the provider? Where was that safe container for you to find and uncover who you were in this world?
You were spot on in terms of what caused the end of my marriage and made me want to think that I could do better at this as a solo parent and solo provider, because I would say that my ex-husband has a lot of trauma with his father, and because that was never appropriately worked on through the course of our relationship, I felt that when my ex's father would make him feel inferior, the only way for my ex-husband to rebalance that in himself would be to come home. And I have to be careful about how I say this, because it's not like my ex came home and was like very aggressive or very toxic masculine in any kind of way. If anything, my ex-husband he would be in his toxic femininity because he was unable to speak up for himself. And when he could come home and feel superior to me in some way, I think it made him feel better about his position he was in. But over years, I became a woman who really believed that she was inferior to her husband. And I knew enough at my core, there was some part of me, now my ego is unconscious, which makes sense to me. Like, there was this piece of me, this kind of like this inner tenacity that wanted an out, it wanted a release. And I, when something happened in my marriage that we could not come back from, he did something where I would never be able to see him as my protector again. That was my out. That was the one way that I could actually break the bond without extreme guilt and shame as a mother of a young child. And
Notice
it
you just
was,
swallowed that down. Try opening to that a little bit more.
we're going to have to go over these ocean breaths. This could be a good time to do this, because the funny thing is, I do them wrong constantly. I have not quite figured out how to do them right yet because I'm still restrictive in some
Well, it's
way.
just because the mind's still uh, entangled. Eventually, the nervous system will just take over. Like a big yawn. When you yawn, that's the closest to an ocean breath.
Okay.
Jump in the ocean, jump in the ice cold water, and watch what your body does. You
I was
go,
like, I can think about that. I can do the like,
it's like so. It's just this, yeah, and it's really. It's opening. It's opening from the inside out. So I always think about, like, when I teach classes, ocean breath is is really the art of deep throating. It's the art of receiving a man's cock to the very back of your throat and really receiving it. I'm talking taking it all the way back and opening the whole channel and allowing the body to hand over everything else that isn't true anymore. It's receiving. It's the receptive aspect. It's opening to life. It's opening to the pain. It's opening to what's here, and then oh, we give it out, we give it out, and the earth takes it, like the ether takes it. You know, energy circulates, and it's food for the trees, really.
I can tell when I did it because I needed it, because I always get, it could be two breaths, but I get that little spark of being lightheaded. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, what were you holding there? Why? It's like the other sign that, yeah, you were trying to hop out of what you're saying. You're trying to hop out of this experience rather than,
Appreciate.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I don't want,
The opening has to happen just as much as you're opening in the throat. You're opening to the bowl of your pelvis. You're opening deep, 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 and then
and that was part of
vocalizing.
what I noticed when we were on the lawn doing the thing. You were saying where to breathe into, and without you adding that, like I tend to think that breathing is limited to like circulating air in my mouth, like so up here, so shallow. But then it was like, no, down here, no, down here. And you would get low and I would try and breathe and no sound would come out, which was how shut off it
Well,
completely.
that's when we're hitting that, we're hitting a moment where you froze and you didn't speak your truth and a no didn't happen or whatever was needed, and we're touching something where the nervous system now, I mean, higher self or soul self is always present, and you have to, I feel like you need a little basics before you can jump into this level of work where you're aware that you know, there's this consistent part of you that's always connected to everything at all times. It's interconnected. And then there's this def- defined part of you that's here to have an experience, and it has an ego and it builds a narrative, and you know, there's layers upon that, right? And so it's really important in those moments that your love, your unconditional love, your connection to that interconnected truth is present, that you are holding for the past where you didn't get held properly, where it wasn't safe to move through the full cycle of the trauma response. And so what you'll experience often is, you know, the sound first isn't there. Eventually, as we stay with it, you know, you'll get cold, numbness, tingling, shaking. The freeze wants to come out. You will literally feel like ice. It has an experience. It has a somatic experience, and eventually sound will start to happen. Sometimes, you know, it's not never what I expect it to be either. You know, it can be really guttural. It can be very animalistic. It can be very like quiet and deep, or it could be very fierce and very loud. Everyone's different and depends on where in the body and what the story is. And it's always tied. Like you have to understand we are interconnected, meaning that there are multifaceted, multi like dimensional expressions happening at once. And so we want it to be one thing in the ego. We want to be able to explain it and rationalize it. But you have to understand that that experience you're having with your husband and or your ex-husband when it was happening is not just happening for you in that time. It's also what happened to your mom, and you're re-experiencing like all it. So it amplifies, it gets so big. And what happens when we're not able to connect with our centers, with our soul, with our truth in those moments, we get taken in it and we blow things up. You know, we hurt the people around us. We project a lot of untruths. We make it way bigger than it is. Like it would feel like, um, you know, some of the things that Ben would do sometimes, like it was my alcoholic father who was coming home and gaslighting and drunk and hurting and being emotionally unwell. And he's an amazing human. He's a good person. You know, he had a lot of pain and he didn't know what to do with it. And my mom would take it over and over again. And the woman is guarded. Her heart is collapsed. She's been carrying his pain because he still, to this day, I love him so much, but he refuses to fully transmute and be with all of that. It scares him. It scares most men. You think, you know, men are these really strong, capable beings. They are, but they are so afraid of feeling because they have been programmed to believe that is the most shameful act. And feeling their pain and their wounds, they learn from their dads. You give it to your mom, you give it to your wife, and that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to hold it for you. And the woman just slowly gets smaller and smaller and smaller, wonders why she, you know, has an autoimmune disease or has all these health issues, and until she frees herself from that, and then somatically releases all of that, which is a process. You know, this work is not like you do this one session and Sam, you're good. It's like this is the lifelong journey. That pattern is going to want to play out through you, through your lineage, from this conditioned like culture where we've been all holding this awful story for so long, and we play it out, and our government is our parents, and you know, it's just it's not healthy, right? We're not taking responsibility. We're like so codependent. We blame outside of ourselves. There's so much of these patterns. I do it. I blame my husband sometimes, and you know when I blame him? I blame him when I am not tending to my needs, and when I'm not being honest and vocalizing what my needs are to the people around me. And the thing is it's not up to them to provide those needs. It's for me to create space and claim it. Nobody is ever going to be enough for you. This is the thing. Nobody is ever going to be enough. You have to be enough for you. And you have to meet your needs, and you have to connect with all these parts. And I think the reason why we're human design proves this, our design lights up in different ways with different people. We are relational beings. Our healing has to happen in relationship. Our healing has to happen in relationship. If you try and stay on an island on your own, you'll only get so far. And all that shadow will just come out in all the relational areas. So you go back to hiding and staying in your own little place. And it sucks because you know how much pleasure and joy and love you can experience in relationship? And isn't it worth then all of us being humble enough to see we all have shadow, we all have pain, we all have stuff we need to work through? And can we create spaces and communities and dynamics where we can move through this together, and we can stop playing the victim or the perpetrator or even the savior in that complex, and truly come into a place of empowerment? You know, it would be lovely to see. And that's what I'm working on for myself, and maybe it'll rub off.
Well, I know, I feel like I'm similarly telling people be alone and also be in communion. And I know that that can be confusing, but there is, a little bit of a sequence for this for most of us, which is you need to start by being alone. You need to start by being alone so that you know what you feel like. You just need to be aware of what your own current baseline is. And then you can be with others with the awareness of how you change. You have to know how you feel in the beginning, then you have to know what it's like to be with others. I saw this post, I think yesterday, that said, did you really heal all your triggers, or do you just spend too much time alone? And I thought that was an excellent point because, yeah, I want to be alone all the time, but I also want to be in communion. I want to experiment. I want to try what I've learned, see if it's valid. With human design, the fact that we get to each be our own authority, I think is one of the first things that has the most power for all of us, because when we come out of certain situations where we feel like, husband is authority, government is authority, coach is authority, there are so many people that you think you're supposed to listen to them, and who knows, maybe you end up being really small with what you think you're supposed to carry for them. Like, there has to be this moment where you're validated that there's something internal in you, or maybe I don't necessarily, I'm so specific about this. I'm like, okay, lunar beings, your authority is not internal, mental projectors, it's not necessarily an internal authority, but we all have a personal thing that we're in relationship with that gets to help us make decisions as ourselves. And through that, you can attempt to do some of your other, whether we call it deconditioning, whether we call it healing, but you can work on your relationship with yourself with some tools in your toolkit that are self-protective. right? When you're saying, it's about being in love with yourself, meeting your needs yourself. Like I really hear that and I hear how important that is. But I also know that you're not telling me to be alone in any way. It's how to work on me in order to bring me into communion that is healthy communion, the right communion, correct communion.
Well, as a three girl, you know it's going to be some trial and error.
Yep.
Yeah. So, you go be prepared for that. But definitely I would offer that one of the things that I've observed in myself is anything that I'm experiencing out here in relationship is just trying to shed light or bring call forth anything that's happening within here. And so like you said, it's so important to, I would say, titrate how much time you spend in here first, connecting and knowing what does it feel like to be fully in my body, in myself. And this is different than being at home and watching Netflix. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking being in quiet, spacious, still moments where you are truly, uh, you know, understanding the way your body, your being wants to come into an expression. It wants to express. Like that's what we're here to do. So that you titrate that with then going out and relating, and anything that isn't of a frequency of love. Let's say love is the baseline, but it's like, peace, joy, all that frequency. Anything that isn't that, that you can't hold, and you get triggered into lower frequency, frustration, in my case, would, and the layers below that, then it's just that's that opportunity to see, oh, there's something from my past, there's something from the lineage, there's something that wants to be seen, and this person's offering so kindly we'll say to help me see it and play it out. And it if we behaved like this towards each other, I mean, I don't think we'd ever hear someone talk unkindly behind someone else's back if we all took true responsibility for our shadows and what was going on. And it's not to say that there isn't confrontation. It's not to say that you don't go to someone and be like, hey, that wasn't okay. But when that happens, I'm grounded and I'm in my body and I'm saying it from a place of love. It's not, oh, you're bad and you did it and attacking. It's like, hey, this is not okay for me, and this is what I need, and this is how I want to be in relationship. Those expectations you put on me, or whatever the situation might be, you're holding it in your center. When it gets all, in the, like, in the pain, in the wound, and we can't see clearly, we're eclipsed in that moment, and it may as well just pause. Or if they're a safe person, like, I love my partner for this, and this is what we do for each other, and this is what I want to do with my closest friends like yourself, is to be able to have those moments where sometimes that comes up and the other person just goes into container mode. Okay, I'll see you, I'll witness you, I'll mirror back, and I'll do my best to remind you to open to what you're experiencing. I won't play the other side for you. Like, I won't play out the you know what I mean, the drama for you. I'll be steady so that you can actually see it as a mirror, because that's all it ever actually is, right? And then once that happens, we deepen. The moment one of us, and this has to happen on both sides, it can't just be one sided, because otherwise deepening doesn't happen. But the more we can delayer and show parts of our vulnerability, the more we get to see holified, all of self, and we feel safer. And safe isn't something that comes from something like someone does. It's the willingness for each person to show up in their truth and in vulnerability, and then hold for the other, not self, and build that over time, build that trust over time. We do that with, at least this has been my experience with God, so to speak, or source, or whatever you want to call it, the infinite, I don't know, the design, the thing that, the crystal part that continues on regardless of whether we stay in this form or not. There's an energy that's there, and when we are willing to, um like, trust strategy and authority, when we open to that truth, we start to see, oh, more godlike synchronistic moments, because, oh, I get to be more myself. Oh, this is so much more easeful. Oh, it's just happening for me. All that efforting and all that proving and all that striving, it's like exhausting, draining. No wonder, like, I was on the floor burnt out for the 10th time, and that you start to feel like this is just me co-creating with the energy that wants to, and that is available to me, and it's specific to me. This unique design is only here to have one unique expression, so to speak. You know, it's not meant to be like anyone else's. And so the I love human design for the grace it's given me to stop trying to understand all the people in my life. I look at their design, I'm like, oh, that's why they behave that way. Oh, that's why they see it that way. Instead of trying to be, see it my way. Can't you just see it my way? Why won't you love me? You know, it's so exhausting to be in that dynamic. So I feel like the more we can open to life, open to whatever's here, and like you said, spend time with ourselves to know what the truth is so that we know when we're not. And so we can stop hurting each other. And not that we won't, we're going to hurt each other, but then we can take responsibility, apologize, you know, forgive ourselves so we can move forward and grow.
You and I could talk and talk and talk.
I know.
And this is why I wanted you on the podcast, not just as a guest, but as a regular voice, because you don't fluff up the truth. I I don't think there's been another podcast guest where the conversation has been not only this honest, but like your honesty that you direct to me, the way that you speak to me, I'm like so hungry for it. I think that people might tiptoe around me a little bit. And there's definitely some level of assumption in why they should do that, because I'm not asking people to hide their truth around me. And even in like what they're seeing in me, I don't have the ability to see myself as a projector. And I know that you're not seeing me in terms of grabbing my monopole, but you are so much yourself still in my presence. Like you're not trying to make yourself different to save my feelings in any way. And I value that immensely. Like I get to feel like I'm having real conversations with you. And that is the point of communion for me. That tells me that there isn't unhealthy solar plexus stuff in our relationship. That's so important to me. Like,
Sam, you did a really, really good job at setting the tone in our dynamic as well. So I would take some responsibility for how gracious you are in seeing me. And the thing is, all I want to do is be seen, so that then, you know, I can see you. And I think you do that so beautifully. And one of the things I want to just offer, where you said a lot of people, you know, feel, I think they feel your ego, defined ego, and it is 1 in 8 people. It's a lot less. My other best friend has a defined ego, and I always, I'm aware at this stage in the game that little bit of like, I need to prove something to her. I need to, you know, that unworthiness coming up so much now because I have spent so much time, like you said, being with myself and knowing what it is to be in what's consistent and what's constant and what's true and what's solid in me, that I can watch it even happen in moments here. It's like, oh no, come back, come back, come back, come back to who I actually am. And then it's easy to see all of you, and it's not threatening, and it's not um, whatever all the other narratives you've had projected onto you too much or any of those things. Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that so that other people can hear, like, know where you can anchor in yourself, and those are those defined places. Those are those places where you're consistently yourself, and know that that's where, when it starts to get all fluttery, like, you know, voice changes, you know, the nervous system starts to turn on, we start to fawn, we start to, you know, fight, disagree, and flight. It's
whenever
best.
we're done talking, I always feel like my body is heavier. Like I feel like there are like little bricks on my feet. You stop me from floating away. Like it's very, I feel very like in my body when we're together, which is so important. And it is hard to articulate this feeling because, you know, when you were working on me, I had so many, visuals and messages and stories come through, and they were almost entirely female lineage. It was my mom, it was my mom's mom, it was an unborn something. I believe that my last miscarriage and the design crystal that, well, I think that whether I perceive her as feminine or she was going to be a girl or whatever that is, that thing spoke to me with messages that were so compassionate and so like just a loving and accepting witness. And while I felt like I saw so much about other people, what really what I really felt for me physically during and afterwards was like you did that to my spine. There was this, not a stretching, but it was like you walked up to me and you're like, Sam, you're actually 5'7". I don't know why you carry yourself at 5'5" all the time. There was a like I could hold myself in a way that literally would take up more space, but there was like a quiet reverence. There was this, like, I didn't have to say I was powerful to be powerful. I was powerful. That was the difference. Like I wasn't
Powerful.
trying to convince myself of anything. It came from inside me. And that was the one feeling where I was like, if all of this goes away, please let me remember what this feeling is so that I can call it back into my body when I need it again, because it felt like weight. It tastes like self-esteem. I don't quite know how to describe this thing, but and I respect the resistance that you have to when I say that you did this or you gave this to me or that you are responsible for this in some way. But if I'm integrating what we're talking about here today, then, you have done such a phenomenal job of yourself that it allows me to have this power for myself too in your presence. And I have not had an easy time with female relationships for my entire life. At best, I typically have like one good friend. And I do know that there is some naturalness in that for a projector. We're very one-to-one kind of people. But there is really something to look at for the fact that I'm often either alone or I'm one-to-one or I'm with boys or men. And I've had a very hard time having really good female relationships. And so I feel like you've been such a good example to me and such a good space holder of like what the potential of these relationships can feel like. And when I was open to it and accepting of it, when I received it, no matter, it was hard to receive, but that was the work. That was part of the work, was to receive it. Since then, I've noticed many female relationships that I have changed. My relationship with my mom is different. I've reconnected with my neighbor again differently. I've made a couple different online friends, but the quality of the relationship is much more authentic, genuine, honest, supportive. It's cleaner feeling, but similarly, I've also had a lot of extreme breaks from other women in my network where I'm not going to be a participant in women beating down other women. And because I was vocal about not being a participant in that, it ended a lot of pretend relationships, because that's what they are. Once they're over, you realize they were pretend relationships, but we were playing these pretend roles, and in both sides were, I guess, in some way. Once there was no space for a genuine connection, it really blew up. So I'm noticing that, well, I mentally thought that the work that we did would either immediately change my business or my masculine relationships. That's not what it did. It changed me, and it changed me in my female relationships. And that is branching into now work and my real romantic relationships, which
Think about the first thing that you do as a little girl is you become friends with your little girlfriends. You do that before you fall in love. It's the foundation of being a wholehearted woman. You know, you have a sisterhood. And unfortunately, there's a lot of wounds in our sisterhood, right? It's there's a lot of things that need to be teased out, different for each person, specific in what happened in the lineage, but also not so specific when we come together. So I feel like foundationally, it's the important place to start. It would be what allows for a healthy partnership with a man down the road, if that's what you're choosing, or woman, right?
I used to be very focused on the relationship with men and my romantic relationships, and I have been a serial, you know I want to say serial monogamist my whole life, because every time a relationship ends I get into another relationship, but not all of those relationships were monogamous. My ex-husband and I experimented with polyamory, which was its own very interesting journey, considering that he is sacral and I'm a projector. And now I understand the underlying mechanics of what needs I was trying to have be met for both of us. Prior to getting into my marriage, I was very promiscuous. I had very little boundaries, very little self respect. And I was also coming from a place of seeing this as an empowered behavior, which it was not. And I have been less and less and less inclined to be this way, not only since my divorce, but my divorce was really what brought in my Saturn return. So, yes, now that I live as a 3-6 rather than a 3-3, I have a significantly less interest in the kind of lifestyle I used to live anyway. But I don't think I would have ever been someone previously who would have been interested in the idea of celibacy. And well, this is not a commitment to myself or a there's no there's no goal or deadline with this. I'm actively not looking, let's say that. Um, the more me that I actually become, like the more I really live my design, I don't have the same not self draws to seek out intimacy to for whatever reasons I needed it before. I'm very resistant to being touched by, what my mind says is if they don't love you, they can't touch you. And I don't really like go deeper into it because that sentence seems enough. Like I can see what I'm implying there in that. But what you were saying about like having them not put their pain on me or in me, I'm really, my body's very aware of that now. I'm very not guarded in a closed off or cold way, but I'm very protective of, that little girl now. She really doesn't need to she really doesn't need to waste any of her goodness on people that can't receive and protect it.
The one thing that puts us in a pickle is we need our masculine counterpart somatically to meet us in that space in the bedroom physically to help us release all that was before, not just of your lifetime, but of, your mothers and grandmothers. And you will be doing the same for that person. And the thing that I find so interesting is at moments when I want to play out that pattern of the victim as a woman and blame my husband and make him the perpetrator. Um, those are the moments when I think about leaving him. Those are the moments when it's like, I'm going to be the empowered woman and go out on my own as if this is going to be a better thing. I have a lot of single friends and they're incredible, beautiful women, super successful, like yourself. It's an honor and awe to watch what they're capable of. And they're exhausted. They're holding up so much and they don't get to fully always be with parts of themselves at specific times in their cycles and in specific rhythms with their creative flow that they'd like to, because they have to uphold that other half all the time. And I mean, these exist within us at all times. I tend to my masculine every day. It's not that it's not a part of me, it's just not what's leading my life. So the thing that I trade that for is the fact that, well, as much as I wish it was a straight path to like, oh, he's going to take full responsibility for everything and he's never going to hurt me and he's always going to show up as a safe provider and container. Absolutely not fucking true. Right. It's, and vice versa, I'm a lot to hold. I am a lot as a human being. I'll own that. I am full on. And, I think the grace of finding ways to work through and love and support and be with all of ourselves, all the shadow, finding a person that's willing to do that with you. I mean, there's no perfect man out there. There's no man that's going to show up and just hold and be perfect and contained for you at all times. It's all the women that have this idea that you can like call in this perfect man. I mean, that's all the marketing. That's all the conditioning of all those movies and all that BS. It's not the truth. We're all human. We're all here to learn and grow. And it's really important that we're willing to, one, first contain and protect our own inner child and that sacred temple that is our wombs. And equally, when something happens that isn't okay, we don't play out the victim and we completely, abandon all of the truth. We stay in our power and we call them forth because they are capable. That's the difference. We call them forth and then they believe that they're capable of holding their own pain. We don't put them down and do the thing that we love to do as women to make men shrivel and stop wanting to even be a provider and a container. We want to empower them in their truth. And that's a fine balance. And I think it takes practice. And I've messed it up so many times. I mean, so blessed to have a partner who wants to keep exploring that with me. And I wish that for everyone that wants to have that co-creative dynamic. And I'm not going to lie, it's so not like this romantic fairy tale. It's so much fun. Sometimes it's so orgasmic. I go to the Milky Way, I get shot there and it's bliss and I bring back information. And other times it's a total mess and we have to move through it and we meet it. And it's like, okay, but just if we can all build a muscle of not turning away from life being grief and loss and pain to joy and exhilaration and love, like that whole spectrum, if we can fully be with it, then it doesn't have power over us. We get to stay in our power and then something magical starts to happen, So whatever the idea, Pinterest and all the social medias, all this idea that there's this life that looks a certain way. I mean, I feel for the younger generation that are getting that as a sense of what it is, because it's not that, it's everything.
There is definitely a lot of there's a lot of marketing about what all of this should look like. And social media loves a single woman like me to tell me all of the ways in which I need to improve myself to get my partner or whatever. And I think one of the things that I've been the most appreciative to for you and your honesty is that the more that you tell me about your relationship with Ben, what you've really highlighted for me is that I'm seeking a deconditioning buddy. And I guess the better language was I'm willing to wait for the right deconditioning buddy to show up and recognize that I'm going to be one fucking hell of a guide to have for that in, the rest of our relationship. I know that it's going to be hard, and I like that. I don't shy away from challenging work. I like a challenge. If it's too easy for me, it's actually quite boring. And I'm looking for the opportunity to be challenged by somebody, but also, either supported or empowered or whatever they bring to the table naturally. I want someone who can be honest, someone who can be vulnerable. Sometimes I'm going to be more in the masculine and there is space for them to be more feminine, and that's going to switch. I don't like when I encounter a lot of marketing that says like, all these ways I'm supposed to look feminine or play feminine or present as feminine that actually don't do me any they don't do any service to my relationship. Like putting on a dress isn't going to change the fact that I can't use my voice, right? Like there's certain things that, again, the marketing is a bit of a challenge. But I know that every relationship I've ever been in has had incredibly good highs and incredibly low lows. They're all going to be like that. There isn't going to be a relationship that's like, oh, finally, one that doesn't require any work, one that's totally easy. The work is already done, right? Like, again, that sounds unrealistic and incredibly boring. So now I'm like, I feel grounded. I feel solid. I feel heavy in my body. I don't feel rushed. I don't feel anxious. I don't feel too much about it. It's not numb. It's just like curious anticipation for what will show up next and whether or not my spleen will think it's healthy in that moment, which feels really fucking good,
I
honestly.
love that you called it a deconditioning buddy,
Buddy.
a deconditioning accountability buddy.
Buddy.
Ben and I have talked about getting remarried because we really have gone through a full death after we had Rosie and moved to Cortez and did that whole thing. And we're sort of in this renewal. I reclaim my maiden name, and there's so many aspects that are happening, but I feel like that's going to be in my vows, like if that is what's true for us. We're turning 40 and it's 20 years next year, so we thought we'd
That's
do
a big
something.
deal.
It is, it is for sure. And in truth, you know, um, it's it's a bit of like a roller coaster in terms of sometimes the possibility, but what you said about, being in a space where your body can be curious and open and there's not attachments to things. I think, so much of what I observe listening to my single friends in their dating experiences, it's like they're in a job interview and they're asked all the questions and nothing can unfold naturally. And it's sort of like this neuroses. And what I notice is because somatically, they're afraid to touch that part of them, that pain within themselves that will be seen by this person. And so rather than giving it a chance, they use all the mind and all these outer bullshit things, not listening to their authority. And they use that to protect themselves, to keep that safe. And unfortunately, you're not keeping anything safe. Like you're not ever safe fully as a woman in this world. That's just the nature of being a woman. And so if we can get more comfortable with that truth, and when we are in a safe environment and we get to experience that, and we feel safe within our own bodies because we've learned to feel into those numb, disassociated parts. We've reclaimed the parts that were raped and traumatized and gaslit and whatever, disempowered, the places we abandon ourselves. I mean, the most grief I felt in this journey so far is the places where I abandoned my no to please somebody else, you know, to please the man, and over how many cuts over time till you stop trusting yourself. And now you're just like this sort of version of yourself that you hate, and you have to punish what you hate. So you develop an eating disorder because it so feels good to punish yourself for hating yourself. It's this cycle, right? It's like it requires so much re-inhabiting the parts of ourselves that we exiled and we abandoned, and that journey, it's a journey and it's a process and it's lifelong, and it's not something that you just do one day and you're free. It's not an ayahuasca ceremony. I love that people are going to do that, but that's not integration. You know,
Hmm.
integration is showing up like you were talking about. What has changed since that session? That session just opened you to an experience of feeling parts of yourself that you hadn't felt for a long time. You're doing the work, Sam, of integrating. Most people might touch that shit and be like, F no, you know, that was one time thing, never doing that again. Go back to what's comfortable. The nervous system loves that set point, that familiarity. I mean, stretching ourselves is, I mean, it's messy. It's not fun. It can be on other sides, but it's not really in the process. You know, it's gritty.
And it might be a funny thing to end on, but I'm gonna wrap us up, and I'm gonna say one thing, because as your guide, when you were with me, we talked about what you do for work, what would be offerings that would come out. You know, we worked on your website, we looked at your social media. It was, you know, is Rosie going to be going to school in some way? Are you going to have more time? Are you going to go back into your business? There was a lot of you describing to me what you do, what your work is. And you always described that you preferred to be in person. You know, you can do things over a Zoom call like this, you can still be effective. But from your perspective, it didn't compare to how effective you were in person. And I was of the belief that you were undercharging for what you were offering just based on how you explained it to me. I can tell you that from being in person experience with you. Yes, you're very fucking powerful in person, and you definitely have been undercharging, because I've been sitting for a while of what is the value of this work? Because it's not the hour that you spent doing it. I'm thinking about this work every single day, and it's changing things in my life, changing things that are affecting my energy, affecting my money, affecting my relationships. Like, I've seen a level up in multiple areas since. So now, for me personally, when I think about where I want to invest my money, I've got a savings account for Italy, because Italy was one of the greatest things I've ever fucking done in my life. Amazing things happened when I came back from there. There's also an equivalent fucking savings account for work with you now, because now I'm like, would I rather go to Italy or change my cellular makeup? So, like, hmm, one of these, I'm like, hmm. So I just need you to know that that's how I see the value of your work, is like probably 10 to 20 times what you were charging before. And I'm not saying that that's what you should always charge. You should charge what feels good and comfortable for you based on your energy you're putting into things. But from the recipient, it's real hard to put a price on this, but I can tell you it's a lot higher than most people would expect. The value of this is quite intangible but high.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I will definitely continue to explore that. I am, you know, working with my sacral response, and I feel one of the things I was constantly in turmoil over was like, I want to meet the needs of people that I love and have attended to for a very long time, and they're in different places than I live now, and so I'm going to do it online, and it's just not the truth, right? Like it's not what I can do. I'm like you said, it's where I can be of most service and really empower people is in person, and moving them through a process is my favorite style. So they're supported, like you're mentioning. It's much more supportive to have something over a period of time. That's why we did the 3 months coaching. It's not just one session, right? Not to say that that doesn't have power sometimes to switch something on, but it doesn't really allow us to grok, which I use as the word to fully embody, to grok the the deconditioning that needs to happen, and the reclamation of ourselves. And that's what I want to be able to continue to hold is in person for sure. But I do love the conversation. So I think, this is the best medium, doing podcasts, talking here in this space, and then meeting in these either retreats where I'm living, programs, because or doing private sessions, because I can't pretend that it's it's something that can translate.
Well, if
Yeah.
anybody listening lives in Vancouver Island, on Vancouver Island, or in BC, she's absolutely worth traveling to go see.
Mm.
And maybe she'll work with you over Zoom if she has a response for you. Would you like to leave any information about where people can contact you if they want to talk to you more?
Yeah, check out my website, www.rewilding.com. And I'm on Instagram, Caitlin Rewilding is my handle. Caitlin, Kaitlin. Um, I am very flighty with my Instagram. I'm on there very little these days because I have a 4-year-old and I'm full time. We're building a house and I'm full time momming. And so just be patient. If we don't get an answer right away, no, it's not personal. I will get to you. Um, and I will be honest with you as well as to whether or not what I can do or how I can be of service is true or not. So, but I really appreciate this, Sam. Thank you so much for coming into my life, for giving me the response that I had, your offerings, your YouTube videos, the work that you're putting out there. It is incredible. And I love how honest you are with your own journey. It's what builds trust. And the coaching experience with you was just transformative for me. I really appreciated getting to be seen and integrating aspects of myself that truly were so far, um, repressed from trying to fit into this homogenized society in so many ways. And I feel a lot of freedom, and I continue to be grateful for our dynamic. So thank
Well, for
you.
anybody who's sad that this podcast episode is ending, remember she's now a regular feature. So stay tuned and she'll be back. Thanks for listening.